Hello, I'm Tom Bailey, and in today's episode, I'll be getting to know Olivia James, who is a Harley Street performance coach and therapist. She treats public speaking anxiety and confidence issues, which are both great topics for our podcast audience in particular. So, Olivia, hello, and a very warm welcome to today's episode.
Hello, Tom. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Me too. I can't wait to find out more about you and what you do, but just out of interest, whereabouts are you based right now?
I'm based in London, and my practice is in Harley Street in central London.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I just want to share one last thing about you before we do get started. So Olivia's clients typically include entrepreneurs, senior leaders, philanthropists, and public figures. And after treatment, her clients have delivered successful keynotes, pitches, TEDx talks, and also TV appearances. So all of this sounds incredible. I can't wait to find out more. But my first question is, how did you get into this field? And has it got anything to do with your personal experience of public speaking?
Yes. So I've been a therapist since like the mid 90s, and I started working with people mainly on a physical level, and then soon realized that psychology and physiology are very much related. I started to get referrals for public speaking, confidence and anxiety, and I realized I was really good at it. And then like the word grew. So I started to add more techniques to help me sort of attack the anxiety and treat it from like different angles, basically. So I can create like a perfect recipe, treatment plan for each client. So in terms of my own speaking, never really had a problem public speaking. I mean, I speak at like conferences, and I speak at online as well as on real stages. Since the pandemic, I've stood on a couple of real stages.
Right.
But I did have one incident of public speaking anxiety, which really made me realize how bad it can feel. It's utterly visceral when you have it.
Yeah.
It's just you just wanted to stop. I was invited to do a competition for the Professional Speaking Association. And it seemed like a really good idea at the time. So I signed up, and then about 2 weeks beforehand, I started to get the fear, and I was thinking, I can't do this. And it was so irrational, but it was so strong. And I called the organizer and tried to persuade him that I didn't quite qualify under the rules. And then I thought, this is ridiculous. Like, this is what I help people with. So in fact, like I talked about this, and I sort of treated myself. It's like physician heal thyself, So I've had an experience of what it feels like. And so it means that I'm not one of these like, I'm not one of these like ivory tower type people that looks down and says, oh, well, you just have to do this. I felt it. It's absolutely dreadful.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. And I think we spoke just before this. I probably could have been and still can be your ideal client, because I had that fear of speaking. I had social anxiety, and it was horrible. My whole body physiology, the bright red face, the shaking, the sweating, all of that. And I just avoided it at all costs for probably about the first 30 years of my life. And so, yeah, I completely understand that feeling, definitely.
Definitely. And of course, like avoidance is most people's coping strategy. But it can kind of, it starts to build up, because you kind of know that the rational part of you thinks, okay, I need to do this for my career or for my mission, for my charity, whatever it might be. But that the fear part of you tends to take over. And of course, the more stress we can get into this later, like the more stressed you get, the less likely your brain is to work, and your prefrontal cortex won't get enough blood, and you make mistakes, and you stumble and you fumble, and then it just exacerbates the problem, basically.
I'd be interested to get your perspective, actually, because I've never really worked through this with a coach. It took me about 10 to 15 years, I'd say, to get over my fear. I did it the slow way. But looking back, I think my big fear of public speaking was back in my school days, and it was avoidance of embarrassment. I didn't want to embarrass myself in front of other people. Yes. And I had some experiences at school where I did embarrass myself, and the whole class laughed at me. And I wanted to curl up and die, under a rock, I guess. So I remember when I was probably about 11, and I said something stupid in class, and the school teacher called me out on it. I went bright red. She said to me, "Oh, we could cook an egg on your face," and it made me go even more red. And the whole class laughed at me. I think I ran out of the room. And
Wow.
for me, I feel like that was what then set in motion this avoidance of embarrassing myself.
Yes, that sounds very familiar, and thanks for sharing that. Like we call that in psychology, we call that a sensitizing event. So that's a key moment where your nervous system learned that this whole standing up in front of people and saying stuff isn't safe. Like, and of course the teacher then, you know, making fun of your reaction on top of that sort of exacerbates the problem, and everyone laughing at you exacerbates the problem. So those are exactly the types of incidents where an anxiety can start. So in treating it, there are ways to treat that anxiety without you having to necessarily tell me all the gory details of that moment of shame and like, you know, where you just want to run away, and it's absolutely dreadful. So there are ways of treating that anxiety without the person having to tell me the whole, the full shameful incident. But yeah, so sometimes you can find one specific incident where the client says to me, okay, this is the moment where it started. Other times it's more of a multi-layered sort of case history. So, and that's probably the same with you as well. Now, before we started recording, you said to me that you sort of like, you sort of possibly did it the wrong way. And you want to tell us about that?
Thank you.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I guess may have been the case for a lot of your clients as well, but I guess the breaking point for me when I said to myself, I can no longer avoid this, was I was asked to speak at my nan's funeral. And for me, I said no, because I was too scared of making a mistake, embarrassing myself in front of all these people. It's obviously an emotional event anyway. And for me, that was the point at which I said, enough is enough. I can no longer have this holding me back, both at work, but also from a personal level as well. So I went off on a journey to try and figure out how to overcome this. And yeah, my first mistake was I bought every single book on public speaking, presenting confidence. I read them all, but 2 years later, I still hadn't actually done any speaking. Yeah, so I guess, is that a common tactic that people use, which is
I think in entrepreneurship we call this action faking. So it's like you're pretending you're doing stuff, but it's all this preparing. I'm not ready. I need to read another book. I need to read another book. And of course, like in the Professional Speaking Association, we call this flying time. Everybody you need to be able to implement it. And of course, then what tends to happen is with people, say you do like a podcast, or you do, you speak at an event, then no matter how much well you prepared, there's always something you wish you could have done differently. And even for professional actors and speakers, there are some performances that for whatever reason they don't go as well. And then it's like, how you handle that emotionally and psychologically. Do you start to beat yourself up? Do you, like, I talk to my clients a lot about sort of reparenting themselves. It's a bit like teaching a child how to ride a bicycle. They're going to fall off, and there's a part of them that's going to go, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do it. I won't do it. I don't like it. I don't like it. And like, as the parent, you have to say, come on, let's try again. Come on, get back on. And as a speaker, you have to learn to do this as well, and I think that's a big part. So that you're just reading the books and not implementing. It showed that like on some level you weren't quite ready. And it sounds, it's very familiar. It's a very familiar thing. So yeah, then you have to sort of like, but there's a lot of BS talked about, kind of mindset and like pushing yourself and all this kind of stuff. And what tends to happen is, especially where somebody has a bit of trauma to do with public speaking, if you push yourself too much, you do an event that you really, where you're not ready, it can actually be re-traumatizing. It can overwhelm you even more. So the idea is that you do like baby steps. You start with smaller events, and you learn either by yourself or with a coach to manage those ups and downs that inevitably will happen when you get out there in the real world and start speaking.
Yeah, I love that thought of baby steps. And, I'm not a therapist or client coach in that perspective, but I do help people to overcome their fear of speaking through a different mechanism. So the first thing I tend to do is to say, get yourself booked onto a podcast as a guest, and it may be my podcast or maybe somebody else's,
Yeah.
because comfort of your own home, you can still practice speaking about your topic, but without having to have that big audience, I guess.
Yes.
There, is that an example of baby steps, would you say?
Yes, I think so. I think so. For a lot of people, it's like the podcast or the panel at a conference.
Yeah.
It's something where it isn't just you with nothing to hold on to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yes, an interview or a panel is a really good way to start. Place to start.
And would you say this is a way of almost teaching your brain to say, do you know what? That wasn't so bad, actually. I didn't die. I didn't. Nobody got hurt.
It's amazing how often a client will say to me, all right, yes, I did a podcast or I did TV, but I really don't want to watch it back. I don't want to listen to it. And then we get together and we watch it together, and they go, wow, actually, I think I did pretty well. Like sometimes when you're learning to get over this fear in your head, when you've done something, your inner critic gets turned up and you go, oh, that was a total car crash. I don't even want to watch it back.
Yeah.
And of course, in order to get better, you do have to watch yourself back, and you do have to sort of watch yourself with a constructive criticism instead of like just destroying yourself, So it's so often that they say to me, I don't want to watch it back, or they'll send it to me and I'll watch it and I go, oh, you did really well. You came across really well.
Yeah.
It's like, because sometimes how we feel inside to how we come across to other people, we always think we look worse. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think I experienced this, and I guess others have as well. When we do hear ourselves back for the first time, it doesn't sound like us. It doesn't sound like what we think we sound like.
Yes.
And I guess that can also be quite a challenge for people to get over.
Definitely. Yes. There are sort of physiological reasons for that, because of all the bones in your head, like the way that your voice sounds in your head, the way that it sounds on a speaker is different. And then of course the inner critic kicks in, and we might not like our voice or our accent or whatever it might be, or the fact that we said loads of times.
Yeah. And I think just to build on that, so we talked about some of the mistakes I made. I guess on that note, I listened back to myself and I thought, I sound like I'm from Wolverhampton here. That's not how a public speaker sounds. So then I spent the next 12 months working with a vocal coach to try and make me sound like I'm from London. But ultimately, I look back now and think that was a mistake, because, I should be authentic. I should be comfortable in my own voice or accent, and not try and be somebody else. What's your thoughts on that?
Yes, a good friend of mine, also a speaker coach, likes to quote Oscar Wilde, who said, "Be yourself. Everybody else is already taken."
Yes, love that.
But I think for a lot of people, of course, we have some trauma about perhaps our name or our ethnicity or our accent or our class or stuff like that, because this can all be part of like, I am not acceptable the way I am. And there's a lot of like positive BS talks about authenticity and vulnerability and all the rest of it. But most of that doesn't take into account people's trauma and people having been bullied and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's understandable that you try to do that. Yes, I remember my somebody who I'm friends with, the Arctic Monkeys. They sing in their local accent, and they were they were really encouraged by this friend of mine, John Cooper Clarke, who's a poet from Manchester with a very strong accent, and they realized that actually it's okay to be, and it is really inspiring, to realize, yes, I can be from who I am and not have to hide it and still do my thing, and make a contribution.
And what I've heard with accents as well is the audience will very quickly pick up on your accent, but they'll also very quickly then tune into it, and almost it doesn't become a problem. It just, they just hear the content, not necessarily the accent.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we've talked a bit about some of the struggles. I think one thing I'd like to just touch on now, we've talked about as well baby steps as one of the mechanisms to overcome this. What other mechanisms are there for people to overcome their fear of public speaking?
So the biggest thing is your nervous system, mastering your nervous system. So I've got a very, very basic diagram here. So you've got that green zone, the social engagement, is where you want to be ideally when you're speaking.
Yeah.
Most of the time, like the nervous system goes into that fight flight mode up there, the orangey red, or even the shutdown when you're public speaking. So the trick is to keep your nervous system in that safe zone. Because when you're in fight flight mode, you'll start to be shaky. You might look really like you start to sweat, you start to shake. The prefrontal cortex doesn't get enough blood because your body, when it gets into fight flight mode, people don't really understand what this means. But basically, your nervous system, via a process of neuroception, has decided that you are not safe and that you may get physically attacked. It's getting ready for a physical attack. So all the blood goes to your heart, your lungs, your liver, in case you're getting attacked and you're losing blood. This is what your body does. So the trick is to teach your body, actually, you don't need to activate freak out mode. There's no need. I'm not going to get attacked physically. Because what happens is, as soon as you go into that fight flight mode, you won't be able to handle any questions that come at you. Your mind might go blank. I mean, I've treated various clients whose mind have gone blank on stage, and then that's the beginning of their phobia. So the trick is to really make friends with your nervous system and learn how to regulate your nervous system. So that's like a key part of what I do with people. I treat those sensitizing events and treat the causes where, the brain connections of where the brain has learned that this is not safe. And then also teach people how to calm and regulate their own nervous system. So, a client of mine, we worked together a few sessions. She went from like nervous in meetings to being ready to go on BBC. Like she works in an investment firm, and she needed to go on BBC to talk about the latest figures. And so I taught her a technique to help her like deal with any nerves that come up, however prepared you are. You going on the BBC Live or CNBC, you're going to be a little bit nervous. So tricks to like calm that nervous system response down enough so you can get through it. Those are really those are the key things. So mindset isn't going to help you there at all. You need to speak directly to that nervous system. Great. So that's basically the key.
I love that. So so we've talked about the challenge, my journey, a little bit about your journey and your clients as well. We've talked about some of the coping mechanisms. I guess one thing I just want to just bring up, which you might be able to have some insight into as well, is that I believe that I've overcome my fear of public speaking because of the fact that I can now stand up and speak in front of an audience, whether that's virtually or in person. And I think that's because it's still quite a controlled environment, in that I'm the speaker, eyes on me, audience, be quiet and listen. And not many things can really go wrong. I'm not going to get a heckler in the kinds of environments that I speak. No one's going to throw anything at me. So it's still quite controlled. Whereas when I'm at a social gathering, there's 20, 30 people around me and conversations happening. Anything could happen at any time. I still haven't got comfortable there yet. And is that because of that lack of control, do you think?
Yes, I think that it's a really good question, and especially hopefully as we're coming out of COVID, like everyone is out of practice. I've done various press articles about this as well. So I call it peopling, right? So we're all learning how to get back into peopling. So a lot of my clients will come to me and say, for my work, I have to sort of like go to social events with like high net worth clients. I have to, and it's like, and it's about reacting. And I'd always describe it like two puppies when they're learning how to play together. So they're like, their nervous system sort of flips between snap, snap, bite, bite, ow, that hurt. Have I bitten too hard? Oh, I'm a little bit scared. Oh, I'm having fun. And it's that those nervous system states of like reacting to other people in the moment is something that you need to sort of practice in a way that's safe. So because you know, some people, you're going to be in an event and people are going to be drunk, or they're just going to be, pardon my French, assholes. And then it's like, how do you handle it without afterwards having this feeling of, have you heard this expression? It's French one. Esprit d'escalier, the spirit of the staircase. So as you're leaving the event afterwards, you think, oh my God, I should have said this. I should not have said that. What was I thinking? And then you sort of beat yourself up. So it's about, there are obviously lots of techniques that you can learn about how to get away from people politely and how to stand your ground, and how there are certainly, as women, like we, you know, imagine somebody coming up and saying something really, really sexist. Like, and there is a moment what happens, especially where somebody is like being really abusive or obnoxious, who has a higher status, that often we, the recipient, will go, did he really just say that? And we go into this nervous system state called appeasement or freeze, where we either sort of pretend it hasn't happened, or like try and laugh it off, or go, ha ha ha, or like, you know, instead of saying, did you really just suggest that if I want to get investment, I need to flirt more? You know, or did you really suggest if I sleep with you, I'll get a promotion?
Which is what you should have said.
There are ways where you can like turn the question back on them, because in those moments, all the attention is on you, and you're just thinking, did he really just say that? And also, if they're a higher status person than you, if you say the wrong thing, they can make your life hell. So this is like this appeasement thing is a key part to like socializing. So and it is about like afterwards where you think, okay, I think I handled that well. Yes, that guy was a dick, but I handled it okay. Do you know what I mean? I called it out without the whole thing escalating or whatever it might be. Or, you know, because bear in mind, everyone's out of practice. Some people are going to be drunk. Some people are going to be not very nice. And it's like, how do you conduct yourself in that way? So practice is definitely key, and also give yourself a little bit of a break. Everyone's out of practice.
Yeah, that's really useful. I'll get back to this point on practice, so I'll ask another question on that. But I think for me, let's think about in these social settings. We've moved on from public speaking now. We're talking about social settings and introversion. So, you know, at an event, 20, 30 people, I want to say X, and I want to ask this question. I want to be funny. I want to tell my story. But I'm 3 hours in and I haven't opened my mouth yet. You know, what's happening there, and what can people do about that?
What's happening is you need to stay in the corner looking at your phone till it's over.
Yes, exactly. That feels good to me.
Pretend it's like not happening. I think for there's a brilliant networking expert called Will Kintish, who has a lot of sort of tips on this. I think for some people, we have too many high expectations of ourselves. Some people have got this idea that I need to shake hands with everyone in the room, give everyone my business card, have everyone think I'm amazing, instead of giving yourself a target and saying, okay, I'm going to have 3 conversations with interesting people, and that's it. Instead of like overwhelming yourself, do 3, aim for 3, and then you can leave if you want.
I love that.
You know, I think that's especially as you're building your confidence, and like obviously try and be interested in people. But if they honestly will talk about themselves and never ask you about you, just make a move, you know.
Yeah, I think what I've heard there is baby steps again, you know.
Yes.
Go and speak to one person, then next time go and speak to 2 people, next time 3 people. And I guess you're just teaching that nervous system, that brain, that fight or flight response, that you're not actually going to get hurt here, and it's okay.
Exactly. And again, like that sort of inner critic, sort of try and handle that inner critic, that spirit of the staircase thing, that you don't go, oh, there you go again, you're such a loser, you totally messed up, you're never going to get good at this, your business is going to tank, you're such a loser, you know, like, because that's what the inner critic can start to do, especially when we're, you know, not super socially confident. So yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I have really, really enjoyed this conversation. Are there any final points or tips or anything else you'd like to say before we get into that last question?
I've got a good tip for people. If you're about to speak at an event and you're still a little bit nervous, try this. It genuinely works. If you stand there And 2 tips. One is you move your neck and scan the environment. You're literally sending calming signals to that really old reptilian part of the brain that there aren't any predators.
Yes.
Number 2, if you smile and make eye contact with a few people, ideally, if you can introduce yourself to a few people in the audience, that will settle your nervous system. And again, it will get your nervous system into that social engagement where you focus on other people rather than your own anxiety. It genuinely helps, and your audience will love you for it because you've actually made the effort to say it, to get to know them a little bit too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love that. Yeah, great advice, great tips. And there's been loads of great advice throughout this whole conversation. And so, Olivia, I just want to ask one last question, and that is, if anybody would like to reach out to you, get in touch, or if they want maybe some help with you as a coach or therapist, how do people connect with you online?
So yeah, follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn as my biggest platform. I've got about 11,500 connections on there so far. You can also email me at olivia@harleystreetcoach.com. My website is harleystreetcoach.com. And the way I tend to work with people is we'll have an initial 15-minute conversation just to make sure that I think I'll be able to help you and you're the right kind of fit. And then we'll have an initial assessment session. And that can be done either face-to-face in Harley Street or online. And then we can kind of make an action plan and try and work out how much support you're likely to need for your particular mission. Because I mean, whether it's a charity or your business or your corporate, like I help people with all those things.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Olivia. And again, just thank you so much for coming along, having this conversation and sharing such great value with our audience.
Thanks. It's been a blast. Thank you.